is trapped within her own home, unable to carry on her life as she sees as fit. Anna held her hand over her mouth, terrified that they could hear her breathing. She had been hiding behind the sofa for about 5 minutes now. She moved slowly so she could see the front door. She had heard 3 voices. One of those was her neighbor. She knew he wanted to break down the door. She had felt him watching her whenever she was outside. Anna saw the shadow returning to the front door. She let out a whimper. "Hello," the shadow shouted through the letterbox. "Why won't they leave me alone?" echoed in Anna's mind as she laid trembling behind the sofa. Anna just wanted to be alone. All she ever wanted to be was to be alone. Ever since school, Anna didn't have many friends. She didn't mind that. All she wanted was to be a doctor. But she never got the grades, so she got a job in a mortuary. She loved her job, she loved her life. The only thing ruining her life was her neighbor. It felt as if he was stalking her. But it was his eyes that disgusted Anna the most. A faint sound came from the cellar. Horrified Anna realized that she must have left the cellar door open. She had to get back to the cellar. "Doesn't look like she is in. We'll check out the area," the shadow at the door said as it disappeared from view. Anna let out a sigh of relief. They were only guessing that the scream was from her. She was safe. Her neighbor was not going to destroy her life. All she needed to do was get to the cellar and everything would be all right. Anna tried to control her limbs, frightened that the shadow would return to the door. Another sound came from the cellar. The fire roared through her body, forcing Anna to crawl towards the cellar. Quietly, Anna closed the cellar door and carefully made her way down the steps. Again, a shiver went through her body, though this time one of excitement. She looked at him, lying naked on the table, panting softly. He was young enough to be her son or toy boy. She shook such thoughts from her head. This was not the time for thinking of such things. The young man noticed her walking towards him. His panting became muffled grunts. His chest began to heave frantically. Anna marveled at seeing his heart beating. She looked upon with admiration in the work she had done so far. Anna ran her fingers over his ribs, never for one moment taking her eyes off his beating heart. She moved her hand down his ribs and reached out under them until her fingers were caressing his heart. Closing her eyes, she pushed her hand further until she held his throbbing heart in her hand, yearning for the day when she would do such a thing without wearing surgical gloves. Fighting now to control her own breathing, Anna came to her senses and gently removed her hand. She moved about the table, checking the bonds that held him tightly, and to ensure that the gag would hold this time. After finding them all to be in order, Anna replaced her bloodied gloves with a fresh pair. Gentle words of reassurance were now offered to the young man, as fearful tears welling up in his eyes as he failed to shake his head free from the strap holding him down. Anna pulled up a chair. She continued to whisper calming words to soothe his fears away. But soon her whispers became harsh with the rapid increase of her breathing. Leaning over him, Anna held the spike above his left eye. The young man held his breath as his gaze was transfixed on the slowly approaching spike. In desperation, he looked away, trying to turn his head. Quickly, Anna wedged the spike between his eye and its socket. Then, with one well-trained maneuver, the eyeball popped out. Tenderly, Anna held the eyeball. Checking that it was undamaged, she bent down and kissed the unblinking eye, while its owner thrashed about on the table, putting down the spike and picking up a scalpel. The usual pang of guilt filled Anna for her lack of confidence in her own skill. But Anna always preferred removing the eye from the socket whenever it came dissection. In the heart of Rajasthan, not far from the bustling city of Dholpur, there lay a vast expanse of woods that no one dared to enter. Locals often spoke of the Dholpur jungle with hushed voices, for it was believed that something ancient and malevolent resided there. The trees in the forest were twisted, their trunks gnarled like the claws of some forgotten beast. Birds did not sing in those woods, and the very air seemed heavy, as if holding its breath. The legend of the forest was as old as the land itself. It was said that long ago, a small village named Ratrigan had stood at the edge of the forest. The villagers were simple folk, living peacefully by farming and tending to cattle. But there was one family, the Thakurs, who were known for their greed and cruelty. The head of the family, Thakur Rudra Singh, was a powerful man who ruled over the village with an iron fist. He had a reputation for extracting exorbitant taxes from the poor villagers, and those who dared to defy him would disappear into the night, never to be seen again. His family's ancestral estate bordered the Dholpur jungle, and Rudra would often venture into the forest, seeking treasures that were rumored to be hidden deep within its dark heart. One fateful evening, when the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land, Thakur Rudra Singh decided to enter the jungle in search of an ancient relic, a mystical idol said to grant untold power. He gathered his most trusted men, armed with torches and weapons, and set off into the forest, their footsteps crunching on the dry leaves. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the temperature began to drop, and an eerie silence fell over them. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches swaying unnaturally, as if beckoning them forward. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Despite the torches in their hands, it felt as though the forest itself was swallowing the light. Soon they came upon a clearing, and in its center stood an old, crumbling temple. It was unlike any temple the men had seen before. The walls were covered in moss and strange symbols, and the air reeked of decay. Rudra, his heart pounding with anticipation, led the group inside. In the center of the temple, upon an altar of stone, lay the idol, a golden statue of a demon with glowing red eyes. It was magnificent, with intricate carvings adorning its body. The air around the idol felt thick with an ancient, malevolent presence. Rudra stepped forward and reached out to claim the idol, ignoring the warnings of his men who sensed something was terribly wrong. As his fingers touched the cold metal, the ground beneath them trembled, and a deep, guttural growl echoed through the temple. The men froze, their eyes wide with terror. The idol's eyes suddenly flickered to life, glowing a fiery red, and the temple began to collapse around them. In a frenzy, they scrambled to escape, but the forest itself seemed to close in on them. The trees twisted and writhed as if alive, blocking their path. Rudra's men were picked off one by one, their screams echoing in the distance as they were dragged into the darkness. Rudra, in a panic, fled deeper into the woods. He didn't know how long he ran or how far, but eventually, he stumbled into a small ancient hut. Inside, an old woman sat, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She looked at Rudra with a knowing gaze. "You have awakened the curse," she said in a voice that sent chills down his spine. "The idol you took is not a relic of power, but a trap. The forest claims all those who seek its secrets." Rudra, trembling, begged for her help, but the old woman only shook her head. "Only one can survive the forest's wrath," she whispered. "You have brought this upon yourself." Before he could ask her what she meant, the doors of the hut slammed shut, and the air grew thick with an oppressive presence. The trees outside began to whisper, their voices like 1,000 hissing serpents. The shadows within the hut grew longer, twisting into grotesque forms. The ground beneath Rudra's feet shifted, and the floor cracked open, revealing a pit of writhing roots and hands that reached up, grabbing him, pulling him down. He screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the vastness of the jungle. When dawn broke, the villagers found the body of Thakur Rudra Singh near the edge of the woods. His face was frozen in a look of pure terror, his eyes wide and empty, as if he had seen something that had driven him to madness. There was no sign of his men, and the jungle seemed to whisper in the wind, as if mocking their fate. In the years that followed, the village of Ratri Gan was abandoned. The people feared the curse of the Dholpur jungle and the vengeful spirit of the idol. But the forest was not done. It hungered for more. Decades later, a group of young adventurers, unaware of the dark legend, came to the village. They had heard tales of the Dholpur jungle and its treasures, believing it to be a place of mystery and forgotten riches. They camped at the edge of the woods one fateful night, unaware of the presence that watched them from the shadows. As they sat around the fire, laughing and telling stories, they heard faint whispers in the wind. At first, they thought it was the rustling of the leaves, but as the whispers grew louder, they realized something was wrong. The air grew thick and cold, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward them, darker and deeper than they had ever known. The trees swayed violently, though there was no wind. One by one, the adventurers vanished into the night, their screams carried away by the wind, until only one remained, Amit, who had stayed behind to guard the camp. Amit, terrified, turned to run, but as he did, he saw something that froze his blood. The trees were no longer just trees. They were twisted figures, human-like, their faces contorted in silent screams, their bodies bound in the roots of the forest. In the distance, he saw a shadow, large and terrifying, moving toward him. It was the spirit of the jungle, and it had come to claim him. The next morning, the villagers heard whispers of the lost adventurers, and the jungle once again fell silent, as if satisfied with its claim. No one spoke of it openly, but they all knew the curse of the Dholpur jungle was alive, and it would never let go. To this day, the Dholpur jungle stands as a place of mystery and terror. The whispers still echo through the trees, and the shadows continue to shift, waiting for those foolish enough to enter. And the old temple with its demon idol remains hidden, its curse eternally waiting to claim those who dared disturb it. The legend lives on, in the hearts of the people, and in the dark, shifting forest. Sarah felt alone in this world, particularly after her grandmother's death. It seemed that life was going to be like that for Sarah until she met Richard. Those two lonely souls found love in each other's arms. But then something changed Sarah's life forever. Stars filled the sky like pale corn on freshly turned ground. It was the promise of life in the darkness, a sense of warmth springing from the cold. It was on that night they both met each other. It was love at first sight. But fate had other plans for the lovers who met that star-filled night. After the death of her parents in accident, she only had her grandmother. She grew up in a town where even though she was surrounded by people, she felt all alone. She kept herself isolated at all times. She talked little, and only to her grandmother. Richard was also a lonely soul. His story was similar to Sarah. He too had lost his parents at a very young age. He spent most of his life in an orphanage and had no friends, no plans, nothing going on in his life. His hair, brown, dark, and lustrous. Eyes were the color of dark roasted beans. He was fair-skinned. Everything about him was symmetrical, most obviously his cheekbones, which would extend to the way he smiled. Few years passed by. Sarah was 26 when she lost her grandmother. It was a very difficult phase for her. After her work hours, she visited her grandmother's grave every day. In the graveyard, rows of tombstones stood erect in silence to the left and right, in front and behind, like a sea of the dead. Some were crumbled with the weathering of centuries. Some were smooth marble with new black writing and laid with floral tributes. Most, though, were unkempt and surrounded by overgrown weeds. For now, even their mourners had joined them under the clay soil. And up on the hill, a new grave had been dug to await its new occupant. The black hearse slowly wended its way down the central lane, followed by a procession of black limousines. The autumn brought forth an early evening, signifying the beginning of long periods of harsh loneliness and numb frostbite. Sarah sat in a corner of a dingy room, her back pressed against the cold tiles and hands, shivering along the lined edges of the cracked bricks and fragments of hope. The state of raw abandonment would swallow her sanity whole. Dawn by dusk, she felt a reason slipping through her frozen fingers. She continued to visit her grandmother, but this time she was not alone. It was quite strange, as for the past few weeks, no one had really been in the graveyard, but now there was someone. It was Richard. Both of them stared at each other. There was silence for some time, and they both introduced themselves. He asked, "Why do you come here so often?" Sarah smiled and replied, "I could ask you the same thing." "Well, I asked you first. It might seem funny to you, but this is the only place that makes me feel less lonely. Somewhere all my worries seem to disappear. My grandma is buried here." Sarah asked him who had he come to visit. It was his father. Sarah and Richard, after that first meeting under the starry night sky, met every single day. Both took time out from their busy schedule and met each other as often as possible. Sarah found that Richard was quite like her. She loved spending time with him. They talked every single day. Meeting at 5 in the evening had become their daily routine. Richard was in search of his true love, and for him, Sarah was the answer to that earnest wish. Sarah, too, couldn't have been happier. Richard was everything she could have wished for, too. Sarah didn't know what loving someone truly meant until she met him. They had endless conversations, which brought them closer to each other. Sarah said, "When I met you, I'd already lost my entire world. How can you hang on to something so incomprehensible? How can you keep pouring love into an abyss? But then there you were. There was something in those brown eyes that was so beautiful, so safe and warm. One look and I knew I was home. I reached out and made the connection, and it was as if it were God's plan. You fell for me too. That first day we talked, just the two of us. I still recall the conversation, the way you made me feel. You didn't know it, but that day you saved me. We are inseparable now, merged into one being. We were one from that day on. But don't the years take their toll, my love?" Richard then smiled and replied, "Were we ever strangers? I'm not sure we were. That day I first saw you, there was something even then, though I didn't know what. It was like an orange glow bursting over a dark horizon. Something just for us. The only thing that would help us get through this life. It was the dawn of the person I am today, the person I was destined to be. I would give up anything in the world for you. I would do anything to keep you safe." Richard said, "I want us to belong to each other forever. I was always in search for my soulmate, and I decided that until I find her, I won't give up. And now my unfulfilled desire has finally come true. Sarah, will you make me the happiest man in this world? Will you marry me?" Sarah was elated. They decided to get married at a small chapel. They moved into a new apartment, and that was when it all fell apart. It was newly built, so there weren't many occupants. An old man lived on the ground floor, and there was a watchman. The watchman was very strange. He always stared at Sarah. It made her very uncomfortable, that cold glare. His eyes would rest on a point, even a person, and he'd stay like longer than the average person would. It was an intimate stare, but something that made you move as far away from him as possible. And Sarah ran into him every other day. And gradually the staring turned into stalking. Once Richard would leave for office, he would follow her back. His eyes would follow her everywhere. Soon he was bold enough to follow her around even when Richard was with her. It was getting too much for her. She told him everything. "He always stares at me, and today after you left, he came up to me, stalking me." Richard said he would look into the matter the next morning. Richard promised her that he would take care of the matter once he came back from office. A sliver of moonlight spilled into the room, not enough to ignite the fiery hues of the Indian rug, but enough to navigate between the rough wooden chairs to the exit beyond. The waxing moon was mirrored in the almost unruffled surface, and where a ripple curled it, the tiny crest glittered like the white flame. But she could not stop thinking about it at night. She woke up to drink water. Then she noticed something very strange. She saw a mirror under the table. The mirror was small and cheap. About the size of the cell phone, Sarah gazed at her reflection, but she did not see Richard. She saw her reflection in the mirror, but not Richard's. She started panicking and went down running. The watchman asked, "What happened, madam?" She said, "My husband is there, but I cannot see his reflection in the mirror." The watchman replied, "What husband? We haven't seen anyone. You stay here alone, madam. But yes, it is strange that you keep talking to someone every time you enter or leave the building." Sarah's thoughts started accelerating inside her head. Her breaths came in gasps, and she feels like she would black out. Her heart started hammering inside her chest as it belonged to a rabbit running for its skin. Everything around her spun, and she squats on the floor, trying to make everything slow to something her brain and body could not cope with. She felt so sick. The watchman said, "Are you okay, madam?" He called the ambulance, but it was too late. Blackness, creeping blackness. She was on the floor in a ball, the fetal position. Blackness. She was gone. Forever. The reason everyone stared at her in the apartment was that she did not talk to anybody but an invisible man who did not exist. Her coffin was buried between her grandmother's and the 50-year-old grave of Richard and his parents. Richard's unfulfilled desire to find a perfect soulmate was finally fulfilled.